Aloha and welcome to our video on air masses. In this video we will describe an air mass, we'll explain the characteristic features of each type of air mass, and then we'll explain the influence of continental, polar, and maritime tropical air masses on the majority of North America. Okay, so in this picture we're going to look at air masses, and first thing we need to know is what an air mass is. And an air mass is just a large body of air that has the same basic properties within it. And when we talk about properties, we're going to talk about two of them primarily. We're going to talk about temperature and we're going to talk about humidity. Okay, so how much water is in there and then what temperature it's at. So when we name an air mass, we name it from where it's formed, and where it's formed is going to define its properties. So the first part of the name, we'll see that we can be maritime or continental. So we'll see maritime or continental in both the reds and the blues. And what that's going to tell me is its humidity. So if I have a maritime air mass, that means that it formed over water, and that means that it's going to be a wet air mass, meaning it's going to have some kind of moisture associated with it. If it's a continental air mass, then it formed over land, and we'll call that a dry air mass. So we can see the difference between a wet and a dry air mass. A wet air mass will have more moisture in it, it'll have a higher humidity level, versus a continental mass, which is a dry mass, which is going to have less water inside of it. Now we also talked a little bit about temperature, and temperature is going to be the second part of the name. Notice how we have polar and tropical. If I have polar air masses, that means it formed in the higher latitudes and it's going to be a cold air mass. If I have a tropical air mass, then it's going to form down in the tropics and it's going to be a warm or a hot air mass. And we can have a couple others. Sometimes you'll hear about an Arctic air mass, okay, and those are going to be super cold air masses. Or sometimes you'll hear of an equatorial air mass, which is going to be a warmer, like a hot air mass. But basically we'll name them. So if we look at a maritime polar, which is this one here, we know that it's going to be a wet, cold air mass. So as you can see, the name is going to give us an idea of what this air mass is like in reference to temperature and reference to humidity. Now our air masses are going to move. In the picture here you can kind of see a cold, dry air mass. So where did it form? It formed over the continent, so it'll be continental. Okay, and we know that because it's dry and it's cold, so it's going to be a continental polar air mass. So a cold, dry air mass, and that cold, dry air mass is going to move, and here it's moving southerly. For the most part, they'll move a little bit to the east as well. But this one's moving southerly, and what you'll notice is as it's moving, it's actually going to warm up a little bit as it travels, okay? And as it does so, it's going to dissipate. The edges of it are going to kind of blend into the other ones, or we'll see some interactions, and that's what we'll talk about in the next video. But these air masses do move. Normally, our polar air masses will move to the south. Our tropical air masses are going to move slightly upwards to the north. So we can see where we're setting ourselves up for some real interesting things happening when these air masses collide. Now, geographically, as these air masses move, we're going to see some changes. Generally, they're not very huge in nature, but we'll see some things going on. One of the ones they showed us were what we call lake effect snowstorms. And remember that the weather in our country is influenced by the westerlies, so it's going to move from the west to the east. So as these storms and these air masses move over the Great Lakes, they're going to pick up some of this moisture as they travel. As they do so, we expect to see a little bit more precipitation when they hit landfall, and that's what we have are these snow belts, which are caused by lake effect snowstorms. So because of this, we'll notice that the eastern shores of the Great Lakes all tend to have slightly more snow than the western shores because it's picking up the moisture as it's coming across. Now, we also talked about our rain shadows in mountains. As we have this air coming in and it gets lifted, it's going to cause this condensation, precipitation will happen, and then we'll have our drier air moving out this way. So locally, geographic features can influence these air masses, but we're going to be talking about some larger scale pictures here and global patterns coming up in the next couple videos. Okay, so that's it for this one. As always, good luck on your quiz, and we'll see you in the next video.